Today, New Day Fellowship, good morning. I guess the title of this sermon is going to be Prayer and Fasting and Bulldozing. I have an apology. First of all, I want to apologize because there's plenty of people who are probably better at prayer and fasting than I am, and there's plenty of people who are probably better at bulldozing than I am. That's not the point. I'm not trying to say I'm an expert at either one. I'm just going to make some observations about both of them and how that they can be similar. And you're going to say, that sounds a little bit crazy. Well, it kind of is, but I was still kind of struggling with what I was going to do. And Friday morning, I woke up from a dream, and this was the kind of stuff I had, and I just ran with it. So that's where we are. So first of all, it's not my first rodeo with the bulldozer, so I can, you're not going to get a lot of the stuff that I learned the first time or whatever, but that's okay. But it's also, I've done the prayer and fasting, so that's not the first time on that either. So I guess we're probably okay. But I think that first thing you've got to do for the dozer, you got to look ahead and say, when do I want to do this thing? It's not like you just say, okay, deliver it tomorrow, we'll get after it. You got to make sure you got all the paperwork. They've got to have addresses, make sure that they know where to deliver it. The drop spots, they've got to be sure that they can do that kind of stuff. You've got to make sure that, they'll have the dozer available during that time. There's a lot of things that kind of go into this. And so I had 2 weeks in mind. This past week and then the week before that. Those were the 2 weeks that I could have done it. I was also trying to make sure that I had some help if I needed. Son-in-law was available, that kind of stuff. Because it's going to be a commitment. And you get yourself ready in other ways, like, making sure that you've got all your laundry done, because you're probably not going to be doing laundry for the week. It doesn't really matter what you wear, but you do need some clothes. And so you're going to be just kind of, this is where your life's going to go. You go shopping, make sure you got food ready to go, and so there's that kind of preparation. Well, if you're going to do prayer and fasting, you kind of need to do some of the same prep, because you kind of need to decide what you're going to be, what is your focus? And for the previous times, there has been something on my heart that I needed to work through, and that's why I did it. But you certainly could decide, I'm going to do a prayer and fast during this time. And there are certain times that trying to do that prayer and fasting probably would be a bad idea. Trying to do one in the middle of Christmas holidays is probably not going to work. There's too many distractions, all kind of that stuff. So you may want to look at all those things anyway. You're going to shop around, make sure that, look for a dozer and whatever, and then you're going to get it all going. Well, if this is your first time to do, prayer at all, well, you've had some input, certainly. I mean, we hope that you've had a mentor or somebody that has, you've seen pray or you've learned from it. But I guess there are people that could be converted, and this is their first time they've learned to pray. But I think even with that, Jesus taught us, how to pray. He said, how do you pray? And he said, the Lord's Prayer, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as is heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses or debts, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from. And that's where it gets a little interesting, just throwing this at you. The end of that prayer, this is something that you can take to the bank. And the reason I can say that is that there's an entire section in the Greek book that a lot of seminary students study their Greek with. He's the Greek teacher. He's world famous, internationally famous. He's a biblical scholar for Greek. He says that when we end that prayer, it could be either deliver us from evil or deliver us from the evil one. The way that the grammar is written in there is it could be deliver us from the evil one. And so when you think of evil, evil is something that's out there and it's going to be whatever, but we really want to ultimately be delivered from Satan more than we want to be delivered from the evil. You kind of try to say that evil's going to, keep evil away from me. I don't know if that's really going to happen, but I don't want to end up with Satan. And so that's what the Greek says. But anyway, just throwing that at you. So along with this, and like I said, even with the evil, you kind of expect some challenges. So first challenge on the day of is that I've had previous dozers. This one is a bigger one because the one that they were going to rent me, they needed to work on some more from the last person that turned it in. Something happened, and so they gave me a bigger dozer. Well, This time it didn't come with like a flat trailer. It came with like an 18-wheel trailer that was 90 feet long. And on the country roads that I have out there, trying to turn that big sucker around and get it backed in so we can unload and all that stuff, I've never been up close and personal with one of those things, and it was pretty incredible. But there's a turn that they had to make a right angle and then back in, like another turn. There's like a T, and they got to do that. And my neighbor, fortunately, and unfortunately, neighbor has some timbers on the corner. So he gets there, and we realize he's going to have to be able to turn wide. So those timbers got to move. So guess who gets to move the timbers? And another thing that happened that's kind of just a little comical, because the first with the other guys, they just backed up, and we put it off. Well, he's blocking traffic. And so one of the neighbors up the hill is trying to go to work or whatever stuff he was doing that morning, and she took pictures and posted on our group chat that somebody's getting the bulldozer delivered. So now you can imagine that, who's who, everybody that's on that chat's trying to figure out who. And I'm watching this, and I'm like, they're talking about me, and they don't know that I'm on here. And so I just thought it'd be a little funny, and I said, it's that damn Dr. Jones. Well, by doing that, it was fun because two of the guys that I'm sure that the moment I did that, it popped up as coming from me, because the others were just, whoever. And so the only thing I was on a negative on that, I was like the face palm is the neighbor across the fence was in on it, and he said, "Hey, I got you a project I want you to do for me." And I was like, "This is not what I had in mind." But so I think, okay, we get it unloaded. It's really cool. Hydraulics. I mean, just incredible how that works. He gets it unloaded. He takes off, and then I got to put the timbers back, and I try to clean up the scuffs from where the timbers made so that I'm not messing up the neighbors as best I can. And I start trying to start it. Well, just kind of give you an idea that I've done these before, and I thought it wouldn't be a big deal. And he said the main thing for it to move, you got to increase the power. You got to get RPMs up. And so I get it, and I push the start button, and it's a cabbed one that is complete. The other one I had was not glassed in. And so there's this change in noise, and there's all this blowing, and I thought it was started, but it wouldn't move. Oh, no. And so then what do you do? Well, same thing you do if you're stuck with prayer. You grab out the owner's manual, and you start reading and try to figure out what you need to know. Well, I got through that, nothing happening. And it's funny, the startup instructions they have for you are also for safety, and you don't know whether you have to do this or not. Because the first one is you're supposed to hit the horn. So I'm sure the neighbor that I was closest to thought I was crazy because I'd hit the horn, try to start, hit the horn, try to start. And I called the guy that delivered because he had just driven it. He couldn't figure out what's going on. And fortunately, though, I was flipping through the manual, and somehow when I opened it up, and there was a different starting section of how you start if it's been turned off. I got it going. And so then I'm like, okay. But I kept thinking that it was something, and then you got to crank up the RPM to start. The thing I didn't really like about this dozer is the moment you take off, you're going to be taking off at full speed. It's not like you can crank this down and start slow. So you have to have your thumb on the throttle, turning it down as soon as you get moving, because you're at full tilt. And sometimes you really don't want that. And I didn't, but I got there. Micah, we're talking about prayer and fasting and bulldozing. That's together. Yeah. So the thing is, though, that there's a statement, you're sitting there in that bulldozer not moving, but just as the statement that says you can't stay where you are and go with God, well, you can't sit in that bulldozer and have anything happen if you're not moving. So you got to be moving. You got to have something happen. So, the other thing is part of the starting recommendations, you got to put a seatbelt on. You put that seatbelt on, now you got commitment. Because whatever happens, you're staying with that machine. In fact, the dumbest thing you can do is try to jump out of a bulldozer. You better stay in it. You can get out once it stopped, but you better stay in it. So, if this was, your first time, my first time for prayer and fasting, I was looking for an answer, like I said. Well, for the dozer, the purpose was I had dirt work I wanted to get done, things I had goals to get done. So the speed of a dozer max, it varies. And I didn't look up a D10, but I should have. But anyway, the max speed on this thing is probably somewhere between 5 and 8 miles an hour, which is about like that. Okay? Maximum speed. Low speed, I think, is about 3 miles an hour, which is like this. So, speed generally is not the problem, but it can be. And there's two ways that you can control the speed that I quickly found out. There's a button up here that I can change the throttle, and there's a button on the joystick that controls the movement that you can turn it down. And so, like I said, I learned very quickly. You start off and you better be bumping that thing down because you want to slow it down. And then you got brakes that can kind of just stop you. But, really on a dozer, you probably almost never use the brakes because whatever you're doing, you're going to kind of try to plan ahead. Okay. Up in the cab, you're about 9 feet. It's a 9-foot tall dozer. So your head is pretty close to where if you went underneath a basketball goal, your head would be almost at the net. On this one, you're not down low. You've got a perspective. Well, prayer and fasting will change your perspective. Your routines are off. You're not going to eat. You're going to have more time. And your perspective is focused on, in some ways, how to fill that void with that hunger. And it doesn't happen right away. The first day can be easy, but after that, it gets a little harder. And so in prayer and fasting, you got a different perspective too. Talk about the perspective in the dozer too, but your perspective now has changed once you start prayer and fasting. In a dozer, it doesn't take how long to realize to how much sheer power you have. It may be only 104 horsepower, but the tracks are not like tires, and so they can slip, but they generally don't. Whatever those tracks are encountering are going to create movement. Well, with prayer and fasting, you can be plugged into unlimited power because there's a lot more power in prayer than there is in a dozer. Well, in a dozer, you've got to keep your focus because the things that can get you into trouble, number one is slope. It's okay going up and down slopes, but you don't want to go a side slope because that can make you roll over. Now, it has a very low center of gravity, so you kind of get away with stuff you probably couldn't do on a tractor, But at the same time, you have to always know what's my slope. What am I doing on my slope? Second thing about it is you got to know your surroundings because you got to keep a mental picture of what's behind me, around me, what am I doing, where am I going, what am I doing next? The other thing you always have to keep in mind is what is my blade doing? Because if you're not paying attention and you're driving along and your hand just lets it drift, you can make a big gouge into something, and then you got to fill that or realize that for quite a while you're going to have a big gouge in that piece of wherever that is. And I'm saying it doesn't take long to get something that you can make a big enough hole that your car cannot clear or your truck cannot clear. So you got to be careful on some of that, because if you're that blade down, it's going to dig. And the other thing that's a little bit weird is, you sit in that thing long enough, and I did 40 hours in 7 days, you can almost get hypnotized. It's like a real weird, just this. And it depends on what you're doing, whether you're moving dirt or whether you're clearing trees. And when I say that, the part that is clearing trees can get very anxiety provoking because you're knocking trees down and you don't want them coming back at you. And you're pushing trees and brush, and you don't want them coming and breaking the cab or coming at you. That glass is a protection, but it's not absolute. You can still run a big tree through that into you. And the other thing is just kind of one of those things that replacing the glass on a dozer is kind of expensive, so you don't want to break your windows. But you could very easily. And weird things can happen. I even had a rock somehow got launched by something that just bounced off the glass, but it wasn't big enough to do anything. But I was like, what was that? So your focus on the stuff that you're moving. And then the other thing that's you're kind of in a good zone in many ways when you got enough brush that you can start pushing, because let's imagine I've pushed these chairs over. Well, when I first start, these are the ones I'm pushing and I've got this part. But once they're down and I've got a ball that's in front of me, it starts pushing trees down there. So they're less likely to come at me because that brush pile is now going to be climbing them and they get pushed over. And the other thing about that that's really good is when you push these cedars over, it leaves a big hole in the ground where the tree's roots were. Well, you don't want that hole there. So if you've got this brush pile you're doing, as it goes along, it starts filling up that hole. So you think you're going to have a big mess, and you look back, and it's smooth. If you can look back, that's the other thing. You don't do much looking back in a dozer. You better be going forward. You better be watching. So in prayer and fasting, the evil one is out to get you, slip up, make you fail. So when prayer and fasting, you better have your focus too, because you won't last very long at this. First time for me, I think on day 2 or 3, this is prayer and fasting. I was doing it really, I didn't tell anybody. And I was at the hospital working, and I went out to see a patient, and I came back to the counter that we, kind of hang out. And there's a package of crackers. Well, little cellophane package of crackers. And, I'm at work thinking about other things. I picked the cracker up and I just about opened it and I went, wait a minute. I'm fasting right now. I can't eat this. I mean, how it got there, I don't know. We didn't leave to eat there. Somebody, devil's like that. He's looking for you. He's got traps. So like I said, keeping your focus can be a little difficult if you're not thinking. And I almost broke that prayer and fast over one package of crackers. And very disappointed at myself, a little bit angry at myself, because I came so close to just doing it. Because we're a fortunate nation, but there's food all around us sometimes. And that's why I said Christmas may not be a good time to do prayer and fasting. With prayer and fasting, with a bulldozer, you got to break something. I'm saying not the dozer, not the glass, but you got to break the crust of the earth. You got to break the roots of the trees. You've got to, break something. Hopefully not the important stuff, the dozer, and hopefully not important things to you. Hopefully you don't break fences or your car. I've had people deliver stuff out there before, and my joke to the delivery guys is you can park it anywhere except for on the house or the barn. And I'm a little serious. I don't want them breaking those things. Same thing with that dozer. If you're not paying attention, you screw up. And like I said, you're pushing a pile, so you'll get to where you can't see what's there, and your main thing is still watching this. So then you have to figure out, how do I stop? And that's a different deal. But in prayer and fasting, for God to speak to you, you have to be broken. Because if you're not broken, you're not listening and you're not focused. And so if you're going to do prayer and fasting, you will get broken. And it may happen in weird ways, but you're going to be broken, just like what the dozer starts with. A bulldozer is pretty indestructible. I understand that the Cat D10, I don't know, I think they may have a bigger one now, but one of the biggest dozers that there exists, they took it to the Gulf War mainly for mines. You're like, what? They could put the blade down and push and break mines. But even if that failed, the tracks could run over land mines, and it wouldn't hurt the bulldozer at all. The tracks, it would explode, and the tracks just went boop, 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 boop. And you're like, the other thing that they found very quickly about this dozer is if they started getting enemy fire, they could take the blade and just pick it up. And the blade would protect them from what was being shot at them. And you could get troops walking behind that, because now the dozers cleared the mines, and they got a wall of steel in front of them that is going to protect them. In prayer and fasting, prayer is stronger than your hunger. At least that's what you're hoping works here, because that's where it really comes. Because times you get the hungriest are the times you better be praying, because you're just going to be saying, God, I'm weak. I need to focus. I need to But anything, let me tell you the weird thing though. I said, pretty indestructible. A dozer can be stopped by uh, breaking a hose. I broke a hose and had to wait for a guy to come out and fix it because the hydraulic fluid would spray everywhere. And the hydraulics are what move that blade. So if the blade's not working, I'm not working. And so when I noticed the hose was ruptured, the first thing I did is I got that thing closest place to a gate that the guy could work on it. Because otherwise he's going to be trying to get down to where I was, and But one hydraulic hose spraying hydraulic fluid can be taking it down. Dirt. This is the first time I've experienced this, but on this thing, I guess because it was so dry, we haven't had rain. There was so much dirt that it would cover up the radiators and all the cooling things for that. And I first noticed it because the hydraulic thing came on, warning light came on. And so I called the guy, and he came out and he blew it out, and it was fine. And so I did that another time later, and this time it was coolant fluid, and I blew it out, and it was fine. Dirt could bring that bulldozer down. Dirt. Little tiny pieces of dirt. Stopped one time. DEF fluid. It's a diesel. It needs DEF fluid, just like your, diesel cars, trucks. So that can bring it down. And I've got a note here. The crackers in prayer and fasting almost got me. The crackers. In a dozer, you really want to be efficient because you're paying by the hour for this machine to run. So you want, whatever you do, you want to be efficient. I had a friend who works for HP Zachary. Not that any of you may or may not know, but HP Zachary is the company that made the modular hotel on the Riverwalk in San Antonio. They built the units in some other part of Texas, and then they shipped them downtown, and then they had a crane just put them in, like stacking up Legos or something. And that hotel, as far as I know, is still standing. It's a historical landmark. It was the first time anybody built a hotel like that. Not that I'm talking about that, but he worked for HP Zachary, and he said if you wanted to get fired by HP Zachary, you walked around empty-handed. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, if you were walking from here to there, you better take a tool, and when you get there, if you're just delivering, you better look at something that goes here. Because in HP Zachary's mind, everywhere you're moving, something can go that direction. Something can change. Empty hands spins, you're just lollygagging. So he said, you better have something carry. He said, you got very good at just carrying a hammer to make sure you had a tool in your hand. But he said many times, okay, I got to carry that from here to there. Well, then I better look around and see what needs to go from here back. It could be a piece of trash. It didn't matter, but you better have something in your hands. If you don't plan ahead with a dozer, you can waste time. You can be just driving around. Or like, the downside of when that hydraulic hose went, that meant that I had to just drive it. I couldn't be doing any work, so I had to drive it back. That's not a good thing because you're wasting that time. In prayer, you could have popcorn prayers. I've heard that term, I like it, but it's kind of like what you kind of hear a little kid do at bedtime, that you get some of the funniest stuff you'll ever see, some of the, most endearing moments, because they'll pray for whatever pops into their head. And there may be things they're praying for, you like, where did that come from? But it's whatever, they're just saying what's on their heart. And it may be rapid, they may pray for the dog. They may pray for, whatever. But something may have come up, like our grandbaby. When we went to the Fort Worth Zoo area, my mother-in-law lost her cane. And the baby prayed for that, even though we found it. But it distressed her, and it was something that still, registered. So you better have a plan. You better have whatever. And as a new Christian, they may have popcorn prayers. You're like, where's that come? Whatever. In a dozer, though, driving that 5 to 8 miles per hour, even if it's fast, and there's nothing else going on, it can be quite boring. And the other thing that you have to be careful about too, and that is you don't want to do a lot of backing up and whatever if you don't have to, because that wastes time. You want to be going forward doing something. Deep prayers can never be boring. This popcorn prayers, you're listening to that but I don't know. I can't speak for God. God probably looks at it as like, that's cool no matter what we do. But, you pray with purpose just like you doze with purpose. You do something and you're intentionally doing what you're doing. In the book of Samuel, It says, now there was a certain man from Ramathas, don't know, Zophim, from the hill country of Ephraim, and his name was Elkanah, the son of Jerome, the son of Elihu, the son of Tohu, the son of Zoph, an Ephraimite. He had two wives. The name of one was Hannah, and the name of the other, Peninnah. And Peninnah had children, but Hannah had no children. Now this man would go up from his city yearly to worship and to sacrifice to the Lord of hosts in Shiloh. And the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, were priests to the Lord there. When the day came that Elkanah sacrificed, he would give portions to Peninnah his wife and to all her sons and her daughters. But to Hannah he would give a double portion, for he loved Hannah. But the Lord had closed her womb. It happened year after year, as often as she went up to the house of the Lord, that Peninnah would provoke her, so she wept and would not eat. So there's some family dynamics going on here. You know, you just don't have any babies, yours not as good, and whatever, you know. It happened year after year, as often as she went up to the house of the Lord, she would provoke her, so she wept and would not eat. Then Elkanah, her husband, said to her, Hannah, why do you weep, and why do you not eat, and why is your heart sad? Am I not better to you than 10 sons? Then Hannah rose after eating and drinking in Shiloh. Now Eli the priest was sitting on the seat by the doorpost of the temple of the Lord. He's just hanging out. She greatly prayed to the Lord, and wept bitterly. She made a vow and said, O Lord of hosts, if you will indeed look on my affliction of your maidservant, and remember me and not forget your maidservant, but will give your maidservant a son, then I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life, and a razor shall never come on his head. That's more of the Nazarene tradition of not cutting hair. But anyway. And that came about as she continued praying for the Lord, that Eli was watching her mouth. As for Hannah, she was speaking in her heart, only her lips were moving, but her voice was not heard. So Eli thought she was drunk. Then Eli said to her, how long will you make yourself drunk? Put away wine from you. He's trying to say, hey, you know. But Hannah replied, no, my Lord. I'm a woman oppressed in spirit. I've drunk neither wine nor strong drink, but I've poured out my soul before the Lord. I say that because you can be prayer and fasting, and nobody has to know. Nobody around you. Until it really comes down to food, and maybe you can just say, I'm not hungry. I could say, well, in the dozer, you can do that without anybody knowing. Maybe, maybe not. It's kind of funny where I am actually, I could have gotten away with it except for the turn with the text, because right behind me is a rock quarry, and they run stuff all day long. So the backup sounds, they're used to. The noise, they're used to. Somebody might not realize that since I am doing that right next to that quarry, they may just think it's the same noise, it's a quarry. Unless they saw what I had done, I potentially could get away with doing it and nobody knowing. They figured out later, but what I'm saying at the time. So prayer and fasting is, you know, it's one of those things. Okay. Trust me, you could get a bulldozer for a weekend. Let's say you just get it for 3 days. But you're going to get a delivery charge, and it costs about half as much as renting the dozer just to get the thing delivered and taken back home. It weighs about 20,000 pounds. It's not a lightweight thing. With prayer and fasting, you could start with going all night. I give you a reference to a movie that I'd love. I maybe should take a clip of it at some point. But there's a movie called First Night, and it's K-N-I-G-H, and it's from 1995. Richard Gere is a knight. Sean Connery's in it, Julia Ormond, and Ben Cross. But in that movie, he is going to become a knight of King Arthur. And I think Sean Connery's King Arthur. And so in preparation for becoming this, as this knight, which they were also like a religious order and everything else, he went into a church and he prayed the entire night. I mean, you just see him on his knees and just prayed. And you can sit there and say, well, you know, that's kind of interesting. But at the same time, you get a little deeper as you keep digging in prayer. And so if you did that overnight, you'd be different by the time you finished. We had something coming up at church I was at before, and the deacons committed to pray all night. Maybe it was a revival or something, and we had agreed to do that. And so we had a sign-up sheet. People said when they were going to do whatever. And the interesting thing is that you don't really think about this up front. You signed up. But what if your replacement doesn't get there? What if something happens to your replacement? Well, when you're there and that happens, you just keep praying. You went from having an hour to 2 hours or 3 because you're not going to break the chain. And so that was kind of fun, that concept that hit me because my guy was a little late. And I thought, okay, I'm here. I'm here till he gets here. This is my post. Why a dozer? You could ask me. Why? Well, my neighbor's comment, we'll get to him in a little bit again, but he said, he said because I told him how much it cost. He said, if you really figure how much chainsaw blades are and how many trees you've cleared and moved, it would probably cost me as much just buying chainsaw blades, not counting my effort and time to do that. But I'll also tell you, I could never build the ponds I did. Well, I can say never. The rest of my life would take me to even try to build one of the ponds if I had to do it by shovel. I moved a lot of dirt, moved a lot of trees. When I pray, well, I saw it as a play, maybe a movie, but there's something called Shadowlands. And in the movie, he says, why pray, and he says, well, I don't think necessarily that prayer changes God, but prayer changes me. And so that's a deep thought, pray because it'll change you. I actually, though, this is one of those things, even from seminary, I'm an eternal believer that prayer can actually change God's mind too. I think the best way that I kind of, my concept of what happens in our world is that God has a plan and he's got a blueprint and he knows that Micah's probably going to do this on Tuesday and he knows, he's got it all laid out. He's got it. He sees it. But he also sees that Micah may come to a decision point. And Micah may decide to do this. Well, that's going to change their algorithm. But God's so powerful, he can fix the algorithm. And so I think at times he says, I'm going to give it to him. I don't think it happens all the time. I think it's rare. I don't think we should bank on that. I really don't. I think that's kind of one of the things to say that God's going to give me a miracle. You're putting a lot of stuff on God's shoulders that he may have a better plan in mind, or he may have a different reason for doing what he's doing. It's not up to us to decide. He's sovereign and Lord, but he could. And I think he does, and he fixes the algorithm, which we would have a total chaos if we had to expect that the algorithm God has is like you pull the top and it spins and, that's what's happening. I think God can change. But I don't think he has to do it much. But prayer changes me. It changes what you consider an obstacle. It changes your worldview of what you're seeing in front of you. I remember after driving, I was sitting at lunch talking to somebody, I said, I realized just because I've been up on this piece of heavy equipment, if I wanted this parking lot cleared, there's not a single car in here I couldn't move. Actually, this burger joint, I could level. It could be gone within a couple of hours. I could do it. I knew I could. Not even coming close. I hope I didn't get electrified and whatever, but, break gas lines but I could do it. And that's when your perspective is a little different. Now, the blade on a dozer, though, it's a joystick. And you can go forward, back, and back lifts the blade, forward puts it down. You can go left and right, and that takes the blade and does this or this. And then you can rotate the joystick, and that will rotate the blade. And you can do combinations of all of those things. The reason I say that, prayer and fasting can also change what you view as an obstacle. Because the things you thought you couldn't overcome or that were such a deep thing bothering you, you start really praying on it after a while. God can help you accept it, which is, maybe there are things I can't change. Maybe there are things I got to accept. But to give you back to the neighbor, when he saw that I was going to have it and we share a fence, he said, I got a stump I want you to get rid of. And he was running a little late, so I pulled on the gate on, he knew it, and I had helped him with this burn pile. So I knocked over a couple of trees, put them in because they were dead, and I was kind of cleaning up that stuff, waiting on him, and knowing he'd be fine with all. But I didn't really see this stump he's talking about. I'm like, what stump? And I thought maybe it's the stump of these trees that are dead. I didn't know. And so, a few minutes later, he pulls up. And he says, there's a stump by the fence. He said, every time I take my four-wheeler bite, I hit that stump because the grass grows up and I can't see it. And I went, okay. So we walk over there. I'm not kidding you. This stump was about this big and about this high. I almost laughed. Oh, you want that gone? And then I look, and there's two trees that are mirroring it right here. And I'm like, this thing's huge. I don't know if I can not destroy those trees. And I can tell he wanted those. So what was kind of fun is I told you about the blade motions. So I pulled up between those trees, going very slowly, very carefully. And I took the blade, and basically what I did with the blade is I got it past the first tree, kind of then leveled it out, got to where the fence is right here, got to where that the blade was right in front of that stump, and then I just pushed the stump with the blade, not the dozer, nothing else, just knocked it loose. And we knew then he could just get it moved, not a big deal. And I didn't touch the other trees. I couldn't have done that first day. I couldn't have done it. It took me. There's a couple hours that are involved that you get to where you can do those things. But I figured out how to do it without touching the trees. Prayer and fasting can view what you change as an obstacle. Anxiety versus calm. First time I started dozing, I was scared to death. I mean, it's a totally new environment. But I did notice something this time that kind of freaked me out because I knew it was raining, but also I had a shift that I had to do on Saturday, like 4 to midnight. So I was dozing all morning, and then I clean up and I go to town to work. And I realized that I was more anxious dozing than I was going to the emergency department. Because even in the emergency department, I'm not always looking for stuff that might kill me or bad things that might happen, There are things that we have downtime, we have some motion, but the moment you're in motion with that dozer, you better be game on. And I thought that was kind of funny. Well, without prayer being familiar, you can also be anxious and even avoid it because you really might be afraid, not know what to say. But you get into prayer more, you find calm. It's that song, "Peace Like a River." It's just the same thing. I've had 32 years working in an emergency department. It's like a major league batter. Throw the pitch. Let's see what happens. You get a different perspective. Distractions. Even when you're crawling and dozing, there can be distractions. And I'm literally, and the other thing I didn't tell you guys is because of the engine and everything, there's this piece here you can't see at all. You look straight ahead, you can't. There's a window that's this big straight ahead that you can see over. And then you can see the sides and the sides. So a lot of times you're driving this way looking at what you're going to hit, and then you pivot into it. But you don't see directly ahead of you in the dozer. If there was something right down there, you're just going to run over it. It's done. But you have to keep your eyes open and know what's there that you're about to hit. So the distraction for me, it was late in the evening, in which darkness is not a good time to drive, but I was kind of at that dusk part, and I was moving some trees, and all of a sudden, I saw the lights of Killeen. I'm 9 feet up in the air. I've cleared trees that were in the way before. I had never seen Killeen from there. I didn't know I could see Killeen from there. Temporary distraction, but still, it was like, wow. I'm like, when I get done, I'll be able to get back here and see that again. But it was a strange, strange distraction. Theft. Going back to the lights of the Killeen. It's prayer and fasting. Like I said, the Lord's Prayer, deliver us from the evil one. The evil one is going to give you distractions. You trying to pray and fast, he's going to give you things that get in the way. Trust me, he's going to do it. He's going to throw everything he's got at you to beat you. Let's talk about theft. With some wheeled skid steers I've rented, I worried about somebody stealing them. With this bulldozer, there's always that thought. But let's face it, bulldozer. Somebody going to steal that thing? First of all, whatever they get would have to be able to carry 20,000 pounds, so they'd have to have the right equipment. Second thing is it's pretty dang big, the height and everything. Third thing, let's say they're just going to drive it. The moment they take that thing off, I can walk right and follow the tracks. And if you go over asphalt, it's even easier because it's going to make holes. It's kind of theft free. They do have a GPS on them up at the top or whatever, but even so, you kind of get to where, like, steal the bulldozer, have at it. Number one, do you even know how to drive it? Do you even know how to start it? I found out starting it even. What are you getting into? Prayer and fasting. With prayer, the devil, no human being can take prayer away from you. You can be praying anywhere, anytime, and nobody has to know, whatever, but you could be being persecuted for Christianity and still pray fervently, and they can't do a thing about it. It even says in the Bible, I didn't pull the reference, but God hears our groans and the Holy Spirit interprets them. So you don't even have to know what to say, and it's still going to be there. So prayer is something that they cannot steal, they cannot take away from you. James 5 has several things to say about prayer. You did James last time, but is anyone among you suffering? Then he must pray. Is anyone cheerful? He is to sing praises. Is anyone among you sick? Then he must call for the elders of the church, and they to pray over him, anointing him with oil in the name of the Lord. And the prayer offered in faith will restore the one who is sick, and the Lord will raise him up. And if he has committed sins, then they will be forgiven him. Now remember, healing could be ultimate healing. We kind of get in this whole thing about they're not going to be sick. Well, you may be with God, which we don't really like to look at that, but being dead is actually a way of healing. You're in a better place. Therefore, confess your sins to one another and pray for one another so that you may be healed. The effective prayer of a righteous man can accomplish much. Elijah was a man with a nature like ours who prayed earnestly that it would not rain, and it did not rain on the earth for 3 years and 6 months. Then he prayed again, and the sky poured rain, and the earth produced its fruit. In a dozer, you can teeter-totter. What does that mean? Teeter-totter's like the deal that you do this with. In a bulldozer, you can get over a big rock and do that. Or you can get over a tree trunk and do that. Or you can get over a dirt pile and do that. It is a very unsettling feeling. From driving something that is so on the ground and so stable, and the next thing you know, you're doing this, it just feels really weird. Like, whoa. And depending on what you're over, if you're not going very slow and giving that teeter-totter a chance, you kind of crash down. You're not going to break anything, but it'll scare the garbage out of you. And if you got anything in that dozer, like water bottles, it's going to go flying. But you can actually go clunk. So son-in-law showed up towards the end of the dance, but I still wanted to get to drive it, so I've had him driving it. And I made sure it was safe, and I said, okay, I want you to get to experience speed, just, because you've done this other stuff, slow. Now you need to experience speed in this thing. And there's nothing for you to hit from here to here and make sure you know how to stop it, all that. And I turned him loose. What I didn't realize, that there was a little mound of dirt like this. I mean, literally, that was it. He hit full speed. That mound, actually, I had made a long time ago. It's just rock and stuff, but it was pretty packed. Didn't just crush like a lot of it. He hit the speed. He went up, and it went bam. But he kept going. He got to where he was and stopped. He gets out, and he goes, man, that was weird. I said, yeah. First time that happens to you, and you get that teeter-totter effect, or you bam, it's just weird. Quite anxiety-provoking. Well, stuff can get disorganized. All your stuff can be flying around. Prayer and fasting can do the same thing. You think you got it all figured out. You think you got your life straightened out. You think you got it. And then God can give you different ideas. And God can work on you. It's like I said, you get tired, you get hungry, He starts working on you. And you can get disorganized. That's good. Prayer grounds you to God. Like I said, on that dozer, you feel like you're just deep down, heavy on that dirt. Well, while I'm filling it up, I noticed, and this kind of blew my mind shortly, but even the filler thing on a bulldozer is grounded. It has a ground wire. They don't want any sparks. And I was like, are you kidding me? And Carl, we know on the can of the diesel, it says, do not start a fire with diesel, gasoline, or kerosene. Anybody that's messed with gasoline knows you do not start a fire with gasoline. Diesel's much safer, and kerosene is too. But on this dozer, there's a ground wire on the fill. In prayer, you're grounded to God. Well, that dozer's grounded, and I would even think maybe you're grounded because if you did hit something electric, maybe you don't die, because the current doesn't go through you, it goes through the dozer. I don't know. But that was an eye-opener for me. I was like, there's a ground wire right there, black. I was like, that's what that is. Prayer and fasting can make you thankful. There are people in this world who can't communally pray. If they get caught as a group praying, they can die. And there are people in this world that are starving. So when you do prayer and fasting, it kind of gives you a different perspective. For me, there were two things that I'm very thankful for, and you're going to think I'm so silly, but I'm going to tell you, during this entire event, there was one thing that really I'm very thankful for. I was wearing cargo pants, not jeans like I normally do, and I normally put my phone in this pocket. You see how that's deep and it's good? In those cargo pants, it actually rides about right here. The day that the guy was coming out to fix the hoses, I got some downtime because I'm not moving with the dozer, but I'm thinking ahead. Like I said, you want to use your time wisely with this thing. You want to get your hours in. You want to do it all. And so I had taken a chainsaw because there was a tree not saying tree. Its trunk was this big, but it had sisters coming out that were like this. And I wanted to trim them all off, so that way I could take the dozer and push those out of the way, but leave the tree, and so that way I could get underneath it. So I took the ATV with the chainsaw, went down there, cut it, left the chainsaw stuff in case I needed it there later, so it was fine to stay there. And then I took the ATV back up to the dozer where the guy's doing the hydraulic hoses. And God was good. I didn't see it at the time, but God was good because it took the guy longer to do the hoses than I thought it would. You're like, what? No, I'll tell you. So I get up there and I go, where's my phone? And I start thinking, well, at one point you set it down there. Okay. So I just hop on the ATV. Now I'm looking, hoping I don't run over it, because going up that hill was rough. Couldn't find my phone. So I drove that point. Then I started walking around. I looked at the tree I cut. I walked back up. I did that like 3 times while that guy's still working on the deal. And it's about 100 yards, rough terrain doing this. I'm starting to look under rocks. Maybe it came off and slid under some of the rocks that the dozer had, beaten up. And I'm sitting there kind of panicking the whole time going, if that phone is anywhere here and I start running that dozer over, that phone is gone. And you also, we become attached to these silly leashes because you realize it's got all my contacts on there. It's got things that I need on there. This is my life. And I'm like, if I don't find that thing, am I going to spend the rest of the afternoon still looking for my phone? I'm starting to weigh the cost of the dozer rental versus my phone, all these kind of things. And I'm still backtracking, and I go back to the tree that I had cut that had these branches coming off, and I didn't care that they were close to the ground. I just wanted to cut. And the phone had fallen out of the pocket, and at about this height, it was on the trunk of a tree that was facing at an angle. It was laying on that tree just like this. That's why I didn't see it on the ground. And it was actually kind of behind it a little bit. So when I first looked at it, and the only reason I found it, I was kicking the sawdust, making sure it wasn't under the sawdust. And I went, there it is. Thank you, God. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Because unfortunately, this runs us in so many ways. In prayer, you start finding out the things that run you. In fasting, you definitely start finding what foods run you. The other thing I'm thankful for is, and this is, I know in West Texas this would be blasphemy, but I was thankful it didn't rain for that time. And so you're picking a week. It could have been last week. It could have been, 2 weeks ago or this past week. Well, here's the problem with a bulldozer with rain. Number one, it cuts your vision down. Even with, it has wipers and stuff, but even then, I would be very anxious about trying to doze in a rainstorm where it's pretty heavy. It makes things slick, and you can already actually walk on kind of roundish rocks. So I'd say that you're trying to do this and you're going this. That's also a very unsettling feeling in a dozer, to be moving at an angle that you can't, because usually just move back and forth. You turn, but mostly if you're going forward, it should be going forward, not. So the rain can do that to you. And I think that actually the biggest, if I had to pick, if you wanted to say what can really destroy a dozer or really mess you up, is if you got into water. If you got into some deep water, the mud and stuff you might not be able to get out of, and it probably short circuited, and I don't know. Just tell the engine. So I'm thankful. I'm thankful it didn't rain, and I'm thankful that I found my phone. God showed me my phone. And I'm thankful for the rain, because after it was done, after I was done dozing, now I've got this broken land, and it gave me a chance to put grass seeds out there, because the weather forecast says it's going to rain this past few days. And then I start watching the things, and I'm like, oh, it says 2 inches. What if it washes those seeds away? I went out there yesterday. God was good. Everything I put down was good. It's all good. I'm thankful. Prayer can make you think. Prayer can illuminate things, and it's kind of like heat. It's kind of like, driving that dozer, it creates friction. You get the blade, and you touch it, it's hot. It's had a lot of rocks and stuff rubbing against it. It's hot. The dirt gets hot. You can reach down and touch the dirt that you've moved with the dozer. It's hot. I'm not going to say it's burned you, but you can tell it's warm. The tracks get hot. You touch the tracks that it rolls, and they can too. There's all this friction. Prayer can generate heat too, in a different way. And prayer and fasting, you can think it's easy to do. I can do this all night until you're doing it. I can do this for 2 days until you do it. I can't even imagine saying I'll do it for 40 days and 40 nights. How Jesus did that, I have no clue. That was amazing. But he's God, not. But that's one of those things in the Bible that I'm sitting there going, gosh. And I know he did it. I just know I'm a mere mortal and I can't do that. I just do. I don't know. Maybe it should be a goal, but I don't know. In a dozer, you can think it's easy, but quite frankly, a lot of the basic stuff, once you get it down, it's not that bad. But you watch that hour meter sometimes, and it goes by real slow, and sometimes it's faster than you want. Because you're going to get to the 40 hours. That's your goal. But sometimes you're like, I need more time, especially at the end. I need more time. But other times it's like, dang, this is crawling. I'm not getting anywhere. I'm moving stuff, but I'm not getting anywhere. And so prayer and fasting can be like that. You can have moments that you feel like you're crawling. And that's the other fun thing I didn't throw at you. The other nickname for a bulldozer is a crawler. They call them crawlers because you really are crawling, moving that dirt, moving the rocks and everything else. So, don't have a really great ending, but I will tell you that, that's what you get today, because it's amazing how that, you can compare those two things that would seemingly have no, but really, I mean, you buckle down with prayer, you put your seatbelt on, you lock yourself in, you're going to crawl, and you're going to crawl through that day, through the next day, you're going to pray and fast, and that's to me how you get through it, how you do it. But there are rewards that are very good, because God knows you really are listening. He may not say that on the first day or the second day, but I never, on the 2 times I did it, I never gave an end point. You could try to give an end point. I think that's fine too. And then you can at least say, well, my hours are up. I've done it. I'm finished. But for me, it was like, well, God gave me the answer. I'm done. And I never would have expected it. But it's funny because the first time I did it, I got the message, but I didn't realize it. And then he gave it to me a second time, and that's when I went, because there's a verse. It's more important to be obedient. Obedience is more important than sacrifice. Because I think I was praying for what God wanted me to do, thinking it's as opposed to live the way you're supposed to do. Be obedient. It's not about how many bulls you burn on the hill for an altar. It's about you and what you're doing. And I went, so anyway, but I've heard people that they pray and fast when there are things that affect their family, when there are things in their lives, when they have big decisions. Um, it's a tool that God has given us, and I think it's very helpful. Y'all have a great week.
Great day, and thank you for tuning in to A New Day Fellowship Church. We are so grateful that you joined us, and we pray that you were blessed by hearing God's living word. May his message inspire you to continue walking in faith, trusting that he is working all things together for your good. As we close out this service, feel free to leave a word of encouragement in the comments and share your testimony with others. Together, we can inspire and uplift those around us to live for God. Remember, this is your season. Hold on to his promises, stand firm in your faith, and watch as God does great things in your life. Continue to be blessed, and we look forward to seeing you again. Stay encouraged and keep